Hi, welcome. I was so happy to see so many people signed up for this and so many people joining us tonight because this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart and something that I have been working on for many years. So I want to talk to you about, uh, and first of all, energetics in general, the whole concept of energetics. And then I want to specifically talk about the model of herbal energetics that is my latest application of this. And so I want to begin with the concept that everything in the universe is vibrating. So this kind of lays the groundwork for the entire model. And when something vibrates, it pulses. If you ever seen a waveform, like the heart, the brain waves, or the heart monitor, or even a monitor of breathing, you have a line that goes up and a line that goes down, and that represents that things are expanding and then they're contracting. The heart expands to take in blood, it contracts, and blood leaves the heart. The lungs expand, taking in air, it contracts. That's the Chinese concept of yin and yang. Yin is the energy that draws in and expands. Yang is the energy that contracts and pushes away. And all vibration is an alteration of expansion and contraction. And we see that manifest in everything around us in the universe. It also manifests in things we call cycles. So energy travels in waves, and so from what the first arrow on the sine wave to the second arrow on the sine wave is one cycle, which is also one circle. Think about one turn of a circle. And so that circle would be the same thing as a circle going around that yin yang symbol. And so our entire universe vibrates. And we have a daily cycle, which is the Earth rotating on its axis. One rotation of the Earth creates the cycle of day and night. We have a monthly cycle, the waxing and waning moon with the full moon and the new moon as the moon is going around the Earth. We have a yearly cycle that is a circle of the sun, the Earth rotating, I'm sorry, the Earth going around the sun, which is, the seasons of the year, summer, winter, fall, and spring. Native peoples who, lived closer to nature than we do, observed these cycles, and they built a lot of what they did around those cycles. And so I want to take you to something about 90 minutes north of here. It's called Parawan Gap. And what this is it's a natural gap through the mountain. This was not cut for a highway. This is actually a naturally occurring gap through a mountain range. And there are petroglyphs. The petroglyphs are located, I should grab my arrow, and the petroglyphs are located right in this area down here, closer to the ground. And that is what you're seeing on the right is part of that, those petroglyphs. Been up twice to hear the talk by the researcher who basically identified that these hieroglyphs represent calendars. There's a calendar for the year. There's a lunar calendar, a 42-year lunar calendar, and there's also a calendar, I think, tracking the planet Venus as well, all carved into the rocks. And these little niches, he figured out around the line, represent days and cycles of the year. And the reason why they did this at this particular location was because the gap forms a natural slit for where the sun sets into the valley that you're seeing. And so this is a sunset through the gap. And so at various times of the year, as the sun sets through the gap, a ray of sun comes across the valley floor, marking the time of the year. And so this petroglyph right here, which is also on here, he figured out represents the passage of the sun across the horizon. So if you see the map on the gap over here, that the sun basically, the sunrise and sunset move across the horizon from the gap. So if you're standing at the gap, you look across the valley and you see where the sun is rising on the opposite mountain range, or you stand in the valley and watch where the last ray of sun comes through the gap as the sun sets. And that forms this pattern of the the years, with the equinoxes, the line going straight through the gap, and then the solstices basically coming when the sun reaches the most extreme angle, either north or south of where that is. And these other lines represent something called cross quarters, which are the times that are halfway between the equinox and the summer solstice. And you notice they're not halfway in distance, because the sun moves like a pendulum. If you ever watched a pendulum, as the pendulum moves to the extreme, it slows down, and then as it starts moving towards the center, it speeds up. As it gets past the center, it's still going fast, and then it slows down to reach the other peak. And the sun does the same thing as it moves across the sky. It moves more slowly as it gets towards the solstices, and more quickly as it's moving towards the equinoxes. Well, he found out that in the valley, they actually built pillars of stone to mark where those rays of sun would come through the gap, so that you could tell the movement of the seasons, and that is what lays the groundwork for understanding energetics. And I'm going to do it for both the idea of the day and also the idea of the year. So if you look at the year, okay, the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. And so basically, up until the time of the winter solstice, darkness has been increasing and light has been decreasing. The amount of dark in the day has been getting bigger. The amount of light in the day has been getting smaller. At the summer solstice, it hits its darkest period, and then and the sun appears to stand still on the horizon at the winter solstice. And a couple of days after the winter solstice is the first noticeable perceptive change of the day, of the night starting to become shorter and the day becoming longer. And that's why Christmas is located just a couple of days after the winter solstice, is because it represents the time of traditionally when light is gaining ascendancy over darkness. And so after that point, the day is getting brighter, the night is getting shorter, and you have increasing light and decreasing darkness until you hit the summer solstice, which occurs in June, just a little before my birthday, which is June 23rd, the opposite season of the year from Christmas. And at that point, the sun hits the point at which you have the greatest amount of daylight and the smallest amount of darkness, and then the whole process begins reversing. And so you can see I put the yin yang symbol in there because I'm showing that the darkness, the night predominates. Well, actually, it's clearer in this. The darkness predominates from the fall equinox to the spring equinox. So, and then the light dominates from the spring equinox to the fall equinox. But the light is decreasing and the darkness increasing all up to here. And then gradually, even though it's still dark, the light starts to gain ascendancy and spins around. And the equinoxes are the point at which you hit the equilibrium, the middle point between where you have the light and the darkness, where the light and the darkness, if you will, are in balance. And so that's kind of represented by the little circle here of the darkness within the light and the light within the darkness on the yin yang symbol, representing that there's a balance in all things. And so that creates basically the four seasons, because the seasons are actually marked by what are called the cross quarters. The cross quarters are the points midway between the solstice and the equinox. So from the fourth cross quarter to the first cross quarter is the winter, and then from the first cross quarter to the second cross quarter is the spring, and of course then the summer and the fall. And so these four quadrants, darkness predominates in the winter, light predominates in the summer. There's a balance in the spring, but in the spring, the light is increasing. In the fall, the light is decreasing. And what was interesting is he pointed out in the lecture he gave that traditionally all of these things were marked by major holidays. So for example, Groundhog's Day is around the first cross quarter, not exactly then, but that's where the idea comes from, is that the groundhog, sees a shadow or doesn't see a shadow, which tells you that, winter has come to a close. One of the things he pointed out on the chart was that there was a markings of petroglyphs on the second cross quarter that indicated it was time to plant the corn. And so they would use this calendar to basically say, okay, when the light hits this certain point, that means that the danger of frost is past. You can plant the corn. And then it showed the harvesting corn at the third cross quarter, but it showed the idea of getting the mother pregnant at the third cross quarter, which then 9 months from then is the second cross quarter, which is the baby being born in the spring. And so it was very important for babies to be born in the spring because they had the best chance of survival. So this was the time to get pregnant and the time to give birth. And by the way, that's why Mother's Day occurs in May, which is around the time of the second cross quarter. And he went through all of these different, holidays that are traditions around the world, explaining all this stuff. Now, all of this relates to the same idea as the daily cycle. And I'm showing this to show you this universal idea of energetics that we actually see all around us, that everything in nature is flowing in cycles and seasons and circles. Everything in nature is vibrating, including, we could apply this to our own body, and that's why we can apply this to herbs. So you see the idea of the day and the night, okay? And then the morning and the evening, the sunrise and sunset being the same thing in the day as the equinoxes at night. They're the point when light and darkness meet. There's that transition from light to darkness and darkness to light. And that is daily cycle. There's also a lunar cycle. The new moon being the time when the moon disappears, the full moon when the moon is full. And so you have a waxing moon, which is the moon getting bigger, light coming in as the moon increases. Of course, when you have a half moon, you are balanced between the light and the darkness, and then you move into the full moon, and then you have a waning moon as the darkness increases over the light. So you can see that cycle even in the month. So a month originally was oriented around the lunar cycle, which was 28 days. Although it kind of got modified over time into what we have of months being 30 to 31 days and so forth, and being rigid. But originally the idea of a month was the idea of a moon. And so, again, people anciently understood this. And this is where the idea of the four elements comes in. Okay, the four elements basically represent the four parts of a cycle. Water represents the winter part of the cycle, air, the spring part of the cycle, fire, the summer, and earth, the autumn or fall part of the cycle. Notice that even the word fall suggests going down. Spring, it suggests coming up. Things are springing up, things are falling down. The idea of this. So years ago, I was playing with the four elements, and I had learned about four basic categories of herbs from my herb teacher, Edward Milo Millett: astringent, bitter, mucilent, and aromatic. And I put those on the four elements, and I was teaching that many years ago in my school. Of course, I started to figure out that didn't quite really match all the actions of herbs, and so as I started to understand more basic actions of herbs and expand it, my four element model didn't work quite as well as it did. But I want to just briefly go over what these elements represent, because they're the yin and yang and the four elements, and this idea of the seasons and cycles is intricate to this understanding I'm going to present to you of herbs. That herbs have a particular energy that relates to a particular part of this cycle, and that means they also have something that a category of herbs that's opposite in energy from each category. But water, or yin, is the energy that receives and expands. So anything that has a yin characteristic is going to aid assimilation in the body. It's going to help the body absorb nutrients and build up tissue. Also, it's going to help the body create energy and store it. It's also associated with nighttime and winter, because in nighttime you rest, and as you rest, your batteries recharge. Also, the idea of rest and relaxation, taking a break. The idea of playfulness, fun, peacefulness, openness, being open to receive, being open to new ideas. Also being soft and gentle and sensitive, rather than hardened or whatever. Fire or yang then represents what it contracts and discharges, which is also in the body elimination, getting rid of things that are no longer needed. But it's also aiding the breakdown of nutrients. Okay, so there's a break, you have to break food down, and then you have to reassemble it. Understand? So when you digest, you break it down. That's the yang part of the digestive process. Then your body breaks down the fats into fatty acids and breaks down the proteins into amino acids and so forth. And then your body takes the amino acids and builds your own proteins, takes fatty acids, builds your own fats. And so there's a digestive process, and then a reconstructive process, the yin and the yang. And there's also the building up of energy in the body, and then the discharge of energy. Activity is a discharge of energy. So during the day, we're eating and breaking down nutrients and so forth, taking them into the body, and we're discharging or burning up energy. At night, we're actually assembling things, putting things together, and building up and storing energy so that we have a renewed energy for the next day. So that's why yang is associated with daytime and summer. It promotes activity and alertness. So anything that increases yang is going to increase someone being alert and active and dynamic and going, working, moving in a particular direction, being assertive. Also, because it also has an aspect of toughness, being hard, being firm, being contained rather than open. Now, air and earth then represent the changes between yin and yang. Air is the shift from yin to yang, in other words, from expansion to contraction. And so that's the spring or the morning, which represents the shift from absorption and building up energy to beginning to discharge and utilize energy. And anything that has an airy quality has a quality of clearing, stagnation, getting things moving, stimulating activity, letting things be released and detoxified. It has the idea of openness and freedom, the feeling that you get in the morning. If you've had a good night's sleep and you're healthy, you wake up in the morning feeling refreshed. The spring, normally, not so much this year, but there's a feeling of like, I want to get out. I want to be doing things, which is kind of contrary to what people have been doing, is supposed to shelter at home and everything. But the point being is we get this itchiness to get outside, to start to become active, to be free and so forth. And there's also an idea of that energy of renewing things, new beginnings, releasing the past, forgiving and letting go. Whereas the earth energy represents the shift from discharging energy. All day long, we've been discharging energy because all of our work and all of our activity and everything is using energy to make that happen. And now in the evening, which is the earth time of the day, it's also the fall, we are slowing down. Our energy is beginning to our energy reserves are becoming depleted, so we're starting to feel tired. We're moving into things. It's also, though, the harvest time of the year. Think about that. It's when we gather in the fruits of the harvest. We now have our food, and so it is also a time when you're gathering for replenishing the body. And it initiates the beginning of being able to have things to absorb and to take into the body. It also promotes feelings of desire, because now instead of me putting out energy, I want to receive, I want to let in. And it's also a time of contemplation. If the morning is a good time for new ideas, and thinking about what you're going to do that day, the evening is a good time for contemplating well, how did things go today? What happened? What did I do wrong? And so forth. So this is the model of uh, the year with the solstices, the equinoxes, and the cross quarters, and that creates this model right here, which is a model of the four elements plus the the uh, what you'd call the cross quarters, okay, in between the thing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this model, but basically it covers the times I've talked about, and I've got on here the times of the day, the seasons of the year, the moons. I've also got the idea of our life cycle, going from birth to young adult to becoming, older, becoming elder, moving to death. And so our life has a cycle. And I've put on here the clock. Now, obviously, sunrise and sunset do not occur at 6 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock at night. They shift because the whole year everything is shifting, right? And midnight isn't really necessarily 12 o'clock. It's a convenience of our clock system, but midnight is actually the middle of the night. In other words, halfway between sunrise and sunset. And high noon, when the sun is directly overhead, is actually midway between the sunrise and the sunset. And so that time actually shifts a little bit with the sunrise and sunset. But you get the idea. It's kind of a rough clock from high noon to midnight and morning to evening. But all of that is put onto that thing. Now the Chinese have a meridian clock, and their elements are a little different than our Western four elements. It's a little more complex, but they have a clock that roughly tells what time the meridians are active. And so this is also a clock, and I've also done this with the seasons of the year, that kind of roughly correlates that. And that could kind of give you an idea of how your body is out of balance. So this is the herb wheel that I've created that actually follows the same uh, clock. And it basically utilizes a system of 12 categories of herbs. And I'm going to go through today all of these categories, but I want you to observe a few things. First of all, the four elements and the yin and yang are in the center. So you see the water, and you see the fire, the air, and the earth. And then you see the traditional qualities of the Western four elements, which represent what you think of as the cross quarters. Okay, so moistening is like the first cross quarter, warming the second cross quarter, drying the third cross quarter, cooling the fourth cross quarter. And they represent transitions between the water and the air. And also, water is cool and moist, air is moist and warm, fire is warm and dry, and earth is dry and cool. So, so these elements are cooling, these elements are moistening, these elements are warming, these elements are drying. That applies to the whole idea of the energetics of the wheel. In other words, the most moistening remedies would be right in. Okay, let me just switch to a highlighter. The most moistening remedies are going to be right in here. The most warming remedies right in here. The most drying remedies right in here. The most cooling remedies right in here. That's the way the chart works. And these qualities of this correlate to not to diseases, but to the condition of the tissues. If the tissues are irritated, warm, inflamed, if you're feverish, then you want herbs that are going to cool to bring the body back into balance. If your tissues are too dry, you want things that are going to moisten to bring moisture back into the tissues and flexibility. If your tissues are too cold, they're underactive, they're weakened, you want something that is going to warm them, and so forth. So the idea is you pick remedies not based on the disease. You pick remedies based on the state of the tissues you're looking at, the state of the person you're seeing. And this answered for me a big puzzle, which gets into the oops, I gotta go back to my Well, I hate it when I do that. I lose my, there we go. When I switch to this thing, then I can't tell where I am, and I can't pick the control. There we go. Erase all drawings, and there we go, and pull back to pointer. Now, so the reason why energetics is important is when I first got involved in herbs, what I had was a big long list of herbs with what they were used to treat. And I would go to a class, and they would sit down and go through a list of herbs or herbal combinations and tell you, okay, this is used for diabetes, this is used for this is used for that. And none of it would explain why you were doing that, what you were trying to do, and so forth. In addition, you'd look up a thing like cough, and you'd see a whole bunch of herbs, a whole bunch of different herbs or possible herbal remedies for cough. And so you might try some, I might try one of the remedies on the list, and it may work okay, and it may not work okay. Well, the reason why is because there are many different kinds of coughs. There's a dry hacking cough in which you have no mucus production. There's a cough in which you're coughing up gobs of phlegm. There's coughs that are kind of spastic, and the quality of the cough relates to the energy of the tissues. If the lungs are irritated but they're dry, then you need something that is going to act as a moistening remedy to the lungs to create mucus to help the body expel it. If the lungs are really damp, meaning there's a whole bunch of mucus, then you're going to need something that's a little more drying in order to be able to clear up the excess mucus. If there's a lot of irritation present, then you want something that's also maybe cooling. And so the remedy depends not on the fact that you have a symptom, i.e. a cough, but it is dependent on the quality of the cough. When you're looking at tissue externally, and you've got some kind of thing on the surface of the body, and maybe you're thinking of putting a poultice on there, you have to look. Is it red? Well, that means it's irritated, it's hot, it needs something to cool it. Is it pale? Well, that means it's cold, it needs something to warm and stimulate it. Is it swollen? Well, then it's damp, it needs something to help dry it out. Is it dry and leathery and cracked and whatever? Then you're going to need something to moisten it. The remedy is not based on, quote unquote, the particular disease that we would normally think of. It's based on looking at the body, looking at the tissues, and figuring out how you can bring the tissues back into balance. That was what makes energetics so useful, and that's why once I started to understand energetics, it really helped me understand herbs. Now, of course, you're going to learn details, you're going to learn specifics, and you're going to learn certain remedies that are really helpful for certain things. But the point being is, a lot of times, I'll have a remedy that I think normally works for a particular problem, and I use it doesn't work, and then I go back and I look and I go, oh, the energetics of it wrong. When I really look at the person and I really look at what the person is doing, that's not the right herb to balance their energy. So you learn details, but those details need to fit into a larger understanding and framework. You don't start off learning music by learning to play symphonies. You start off learning do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You learn the musical scale. You learn the basic qualities of music. When you learn to read, you start with your ABCs. Everything has to start at a beginning point that lays out a framework for the rest of your understanding. Now, you build a lot of knowledge upon that, but what I see lacking in Western herbalism is this framework. And that's why I think energetics are so important, and why I've been working on energetics, and why I'm really happy that I've finally got this model. So with that background, let's get into actually looking at the herbal energetics and the cycles and categories of herbs. So we're going to start with air, and you see I've got the arrow going straight up, representing the actual sunrise, the spring equinox, the point of balance at the beginning of the new day, or the beginning of I mean at the the start of the new day, and the changing of the seasons in the spring. And by the way, the meridian that's most active on the TCM clock at that point is the large intestine. Now, the qualities of air that are, it's open, it's flowing, it's energized, it's invigorating, it's waking up, it's refreshing, it's flexible, it's like the morning or the springtime, it's refreshing. And so what that means is something with this energy is going to counteract things that are tense, cramped, pressured, spastic, constricted, burdened, weighed down, heavy, stifled. And the quality of herb that works on this is something called acrid. Acrid is a nasty thing. It's not really pleasant. It's a bitter, nasty taste that with a kind of a sour, burning quality that you kind of get when you maybe burp and a little stomach acid comes up off your throat, or you throw up and you get a little bile coming up. It doesn't taste pleasant, and it kind of irritates your throat. And the thing that's present here are resins and alkaloids. And the basic energetic of this is that it's relaxing. It eases a tissue condition called constriction, where the tissue has become constricted. And by the way, constriction comes from exhaustion. So that's why this fits perfectly well opposite for the opposite side of the wheel, which represents sunset and the time when everything goes to bed. Because when muscles constrict and spasm and cramp, it's because they've run out of energy. And that inhibits flow, and it inhibits movement, and it basically stifles everything. So this is the category of herbs that starts the process of getting that to open back up, to relax, to initiate an energy process that awakens it back up. And the opposite quality of that on the chart is astringent, which does the opposite, consolidates and contracts tissues. So the primary reason that you would use these kind of herbs is, number one, as an antispasmodic, to get rid of spasms and cramps and spastic conditions that are inhibiting movement and flow in the body. And these are called wind disorders in TCM, because they generally, when a person is having this kind of a problem, they get alternating symptoms such as fever and chills, diarrhea and constipation, or pains that migrate, that move from one part of the body. So they ache here, and then they ache there, and they're hurt here, and they cramp here, and it moves around. One thing about some acrid herbs do induce vomiting and make you throw up. So not all of them do, but that's just a warning. Whoop, oh, whoa, went the wrong way. So my favorite acrid herbs are lobelia and kava kava. Lobelia has been called the intelligent herb, and it's one of the best for just initiating that. Samuel Thompson, who I studied his work extensively, lobelia was his #1 remedy. He basically gave a little bit of lobelia just to about everybody, followed by capsicum, which is a pungent herb, coming up next, to initiate a healing process. So it's really kind of an initiator, a catalyst. And the other really nice antispasmodic that doesn't have the property of making you throw up, which lobelia does, is kava kava. Black cohosh is also antispasmodic, or it has a little bit of an acrid taste. Blue vervain is a milder acrid herb than lobelia, which I've used often with children instead of using lobelia. Skunk cabbage is often very potent antispasmodic like lobelia that's sometimes used in those formulas. You can sometimes get an antispasmodic formula that'll contain things like several of these: lobelia, black cohosh, skunk cabbage, and so forth. Echinacea angustifolia has a little bit of an acrid taste. It is not a true antispasmodic, but it does have an opening up of because it helps when you're getting like the blood poisoning, and as a tingly sensation, because it does actually help to open up energy flow where things are injured. So from acrid, we move to the quality of warming. Remember, I talked about the cross quarters. So warming is the first cross quarter. That means right now, okay, the weather is really, you can tell it's warm. this season of year is where you're moving out of cold and into warm. It's not hot yet, but the heat is increasing, and so this is the blend between air and fire. So what do you get when you mix air and fire? You get an increasing flame. You're fanning the flames to produce a hotter fire. And so that's the energy of this particular quadrant. Now I've put two categories of herbs on either side of this. The first one is not as warming as the second one, okay? And that's the bitter stimulants, which are all labeled as alkaloidal bitters on here, and then the pungent herbs. Now the qualities of this are excited, stimulated, inspired, motivated, getting moving, getting going. When things are sluggish, when things are cold, when things are fatigued, because the opposite action of this is cooling. When things are stuck, when things are not moving, that's when you need something that's warming. So you've got any kind of stagnation in the body where things are stuck and they're not moving. You want the quality of warming to come in to get the things moving. Now the acrid, so when Samuel Thompson used the acrid lobelia with capsicum, which is a pungent herb, he was initiating kind of a wake up, relaxing the tissue, and then warming it to get things moving again as a basic therapy for treating things like what we call colds, okay? Which is an interesting way to do this. So the first category in here is the bitter stimulants, or the alkaloidal stimulants, which contain alkaloids like caffeine, nicotine, berberine, lobeline, hydrastine. Lobeline, by the way, is in lobelia. Caffeine is the one that most people are familiar with. It's a wake-up alkaloid, right? And the opposite category of this is sour, which are the cooling remedies. So it says cooling, and I've made a mistake on that. That should say warming and drying. Warming and slightly drying is what that should say. Okay, now when you look at these, the primary constituent here is alkaloids. Now, not all alkaloids are stimulating. Some alkaloids are sedating, but alkaloids basically interact with cellular signaling within the body and basically modulate cellular signals. So some alkaloids sedate things and some alkaloids stimulate things. Caffeine and thrombinin, which is thrombinins in chocolate, and we all know where a lot of places caffeine is, blocks the signal that tells you you're tired, which causes a sympathetic nervous system stimulation to happen. Berberine, which is antimicrobial, by the way, which microbes, by the way, in a biological terrain model of disease, like things, like the tissue to be stagnant. They thrive in a stagnant environment in the body. Whereas if you warm the things and get things moving and dispel the stagnation, you help to dispel the environment for the infection. But berberine also actually has an effect on metabolism that enhances the metabolism to help the body burn fat, much like exercise does. Nicotine, of course, blocks, actually attaches to receptors in the sympathetic nervous system and stimulates them. And ephedrine does the same thing, from Chinese ephedra. All of those are alkaloids. The flavor of bitter in general tends to stimulate detoxification processes in the liver. And when taken without sweeteners, these things stimulate digestive secretions. Of course, bitters tend to be drying and are not good for people who are dehydrated, and they're also not good for people who are already overstimulated, which should make sense. So I have examples here of alkaloidal bitters, caffeine and thrombinin in coffee, chocolate, and cola nuts, berberine in barberry, golden seal, Oregon grape, ephedrine in Chinese ephedra, and other examples of stimulating alkaloid bitters include Scotch broom and tobacco. And all of these things are used to basically stimulate and get things moving. which is why a lot of people drink coffee in the morning, and also suggests that morning might be a good time to take some of those detoxifying bitters. The more obvious warming remedy is pungent. Pungent is things that have a spicy or hot taste and a biting aroma. And what makes things pungent is resins, alkyl sulfates, which is what you find in garlic and onions, alkamindes, which you find in things like black pepper. And there are some essential oils, monoterpenes, that also create the pungent or really spicy taste, which is very warming and drying. And the opposite category of this is oily. Now, oily definitely is the opposite to this because, like, okay, uh, my 8-year-old, or well, he wasn't. I mean, he's 11, but he's when he was 10. We were at the store, and he was looking at the habanero pepper, and he says, "I want to try that." I said, habaneros are too. I like peppers. I eat jalapenos, but habaneros are too hot for me. He said, you can't eat that. And he kept saying, "I want to try it. I want to try it." I said, so finally I said, "Okay, look, I'll buy one, but I want you to just take just a teeny little nibble of it, okay? Just because it's really, really hot." Well, what he did is he basically put the entire pepper in his mouth and started chewing it. And then his mouth lit on fire, and he started, ah! So we had sour cream in the car, and I started feeding him sour cream, which is fatty, i.e. oily, because that's the antidote. Water doesn't do anything to it, um, because it counteracts that. It cools and soothes, and soaks up the stuff that creates the bite taste. So the opposite actions are important because you can restrain the action of a particular action of herb by using a little bit of the opposite energy. So pungent herbs basically dispel stagnation, and they really get things moving. So if you think about when you eat spicy food, you start to have mucus. Maybe you start clearing your throat, your sinuses start running, you start perspiring. It's pushing moisture in your body, stimulating the production of mucus. It's stimulating blood flow to your mucous membranes and to your skin. It's also will increase your intestinal peristalsis. I remember one time when I uh, had a challenge of who could eat the most of a very, very spicy hot sauce, and I won the challenge. But a few hours later, it was burning out the other end on the toilet. It definitely can get the peristalsis of your colon moving, which dispels stagnation in your intestinal tract, relieving gas and other things. It stimulates your digestive secretions to flow. And this was traditionally used for acute viral infections. Now, why? Because again, infection tends to thrive in a more damp, stagnant, dry, low energy environment than it does in a high, hot energy environment, which is why cold and flu season is in the winter. And usually summer comes on, it stops spreading because as things get warmer, people have more vitamin D. The warmth and energy of the summer counteracts, and people rarely get that kind of illness in the summer. It starts being warming and stimulating, but as it moves moisture, it moves to becoming more drying. And by the way, one of the things you'll observe about this wheel is that all of the herbs have an action that they start kind of at the point that you see on the wheel, and they start moving the energy of the body from that point forward. So basically, uh, the remedies that are pungent begin in the warming and move towards the drying is the way that works. In TCM, they're said to tonify the metal element or the lungs because they basically increase the chi, the defensive energy of the body, pushing things away. Of course, ginger and garlic are two really fine examples of pungent herbs. Um, both have been used to treat colds and acute viral infections. Um, Ginger is a little better at increasing intestinal motility. Both of them enhance circulation, can help to bring down cholesterol. You also got the capsicum or cayenne pepper or the chili peppers that I mentioned earlier, which really stimulate blood flow and so forth. Then you have a lot of your other nice spicy kitchen things, cinnamon, horseradish, mustard, the spring vegetable watercress, which basically is harvested around this time of the year, um, and and black pepper is another one. All of these things um, have this quality of warming and so forth. And here's the thing that is nice about understanding this. Okay, uh, when I started to understand that I would get colds, and I was very prone to congestion and stagnation and for much of my life. And then I started to figure out that I could use these um, spicy herbs to basically dispel the stagnation and clear this stuff out of more quickly. Well, I used cayenne initially and garlic, but then, if that wasn't handy, I figured out, okay, one time I went to the Chinese restaurant and just got the hot Chinese mustard and ate that with some vegetable wontons, or I've used uh, I've even used black pepper. In other words, if I don't have one, I find something in that similar category that's going to have the same warming effect I'm looking for. I'm not stuck with a specific remedy thinking, oh, that's what I've got to use to cure this. I have some flexibility that if I don't have that remedy, what has a similar action to it that I can then pick. Now, now we move to fire, which is the the peak of light, the the um, the energy of the summer solstice, which actually is going to occur here in June coming up. Uh, Now notice that that the warming, continues past the. I mean, the warming. If you think about the seasons of the year and the day, the warming continues uh, begins in the morning and it continues into late in the afternoon, or it begins in May and continues down into August and September when it finally starts to shift to cooling again. So there's a warming quality through that whole region of the chart. But this is the point at which you have the kind of the highest point of the warming cycle, which corresponds to noon, and in the TCM, that's the heart meridian. Now, the quality that we have here, which is the herbal quality, aromatic, has to do with invigorating rather than just stimulating. Invigorating, getting things to be more vibrant, alive, and energetic, and moving, and active, and vibrant. All right. And again, clearing stagnation, fatigue, coldness, congestion, depression, and inactivity. Um, and so the herbal category is aromatic. And aromatics, of course, are herbs that contain essential oils. So aromatherapy, I've heard people who really love aromatherapy say essential oils are the highest vibrational frequency of stuff in the plant kingdom. And I believe it. In other words, we're talking about something that has a very high frequency. It's such a high frequency and such a that it's volatile, that the plant actually can't fully contain it. It evaporates into the atmosphere. It goes out. It moves out into the surrounding environment and has this um, stimulating effect. Think of just smelling flowers and the wonderful feeling of the different scents and aromas and everything that just lift your spirits and make you feel really good. Now, they're warming and they're also drying, but they're not as potent as the pungent herbs and so forth. They're more sustaining the energy and they're a little more healing in their quality, increasing the vibration of the tissues of the body. And the opposite quality, um, the the opposite quality is mucilant, which is um, mucilaginous herbs. And mucilaginous herbs have almost no essential oils, and generally speaking, most uh, aromatics or don't have much mucilage. So they're very opposing characteristics. In fact, if you take aromatics and mucilants and mix them together, they tend to have a neutralizing effect. That's also true of like uh, mucilant also helps to counteract pungent. such as you mix a little slippery elm with cayenne to cool down its action so it doesn't stimulate you so much. And also, I read that in Ayurvedic medicine, they consider psyllium, which is an extremely potent mucilaginous herb, as overly cooling to the gut. So they add a little ginger to it so it doesn't overcool the gut. So you can use herbs like that to balance out the effect of something. When you take aromatics as warm teas, they tend to stimulate perspiration. They help to, again, dispel the cold and have an invigorating effect on metabolism. There are a few that are nervines that also calm your nerves and help you relax. Um, uh, they aid digestion by stimulating digestive secretions and increasing intestinal motility. And all of them have antimicrobial activities to a greater or lesser degree. Some are better at it than others, but basically, a lot of what we like in the way of herbal teas and also a lot of kitchen spices are aromatics. Uh, the spicing of food does two basic things. By adding these aromatic seasonings to our food, it gives it a more pleasant aroma. It stimulates digestive secretion. It improves intestinal motility. It makes the food easier to digest, and it also helps control microbes in the food. I know one thing about Indian curry is I tend to have a sluggish digestive system, but when I eat Indian food with all of the different spices and herbs that they put in their food, which are mostly pungent aromatic herbs, the food digests better. So there is something to be said for using these to help your body break the food down more efficiently, which remember is a very yang thing. This is the yang side of the herbal equation, where it's helping with breaking things down, with discharging energy, and so forth. There's a whole bunch of these herbs. Uh, Two really popular ones that are used a lot as teas are peppermint and chamomile, but there's a lot of others, of course, because just about all of our kitchen spices fall into this. But you have, you know, anise, caraway, catnip, dill. A lot of these plants are either in the carrot family or the mint family. Is where you find a lot of essential oils. Um, Now we move into the quality of drying, and that drying quality um, goes along with what we would think of as the uh, uh, third cross quarter, uh, the halfway point between the uh, summer solstice and I, I mean the summer solstice and the fall equinox. And this is an area where I put bitters, the ones that are not alkaloidal stimulants, but the rest of the bitters, starting with the fragrant bitters, which are bitters that are also aromatic. So it's a transition between aromatic and bitter, okay, the fragrant bitters, and then the simple bitters, um, and then that transitions into the astringents. And by the way, you notice how the leaves lean? That leaning of the leaves on the wheel again indicates the movement of the energy around the wheel as you're going through this. So uh, this is the mixture of fire and earth. And what happens if you bake the earth? You get basically bricks. You get dry, hard, cracked soil. The mixture of the energies of fire and earth is drying. And what you see a lot at this time of the year is a tendency for things to become drier. As they get like going on through the summer, the heat starts to create dryness. And that dryness is moving into the fall. I know here, the spring often we have some rains and it's wet and it gets muddy, and then summer then have a heavy clay soil. The soil becomes very hard. It's almost impossible to dig or break it unless you put some water in it first. Um, but basically the quality here is solid, stable. It's also very clear and very clean, and moving towards cooling. In other words, it's shifting from being warming to starting to move towards the cooling side of things. And it counters stagnation, dampness, congestion, a toxic, swampy, stuck kind of environment. But mostly think of it as kind of uh, counteracting a swampy kind of environment where you get detestable things growing and the environment is toxic. So fragrant bitters are herbs that have a bitter taste and also a bitter aroma. They're not a pleasant aroma. I mean, some of them you can like if you really need them, but they're not necessarily they're not like a floral or a citrusy or that kind of smell. And the constituents here are sexoterpene, lactones, and terpenes. They're slightly warming, but they're more drying. And the opposite category of this is sweet. This is probably acrid and fragrant bitters are probably the most unpleasant tastes in the herb world. And the opposite of this one is sweet. Now, fragrant bitters usually have anti-parasitic properties. They clean up the swamp. They get rid of the swamp creatures. And by the way, I was using that phrase before Donald Trump came along, so I didn't borrow it from Trump. It's what I've always referred to as, you know, the draining of the swamp from an herbal point of view, and which also means they have antimicrobial qualities. They clear up infection and parasites, and because both bitters and aromatics stimulate digestive secretions, they are basically digestive tonics. In fact, when you make a digestive bitters formula, what you're typically doing is combining simple bitters and aromatics, which is what fragrant bitters are doing kind of naturally. The only problem with fragrant bitters is they can tend to be mildly toxic, because they're very strong, and they're definitely contraindicated in pregnancy because they're such strong remedies. They're dangerous. Now, black walnut hulls is probably an exception to that because it's a milder fragrant bitter, but and so is L-campaign. But sagebrush, sweet anise, tansy, wormseed, and wormwood are all examples of very potent fragrant bitters that are used to clear up digestive problems and have pretty powerful antiparasitic and antimicrobial qualities. I think that you could add chinchilla bark, which has quinine in it, probably to this list too. The bitters that are simple or relaxing, as opposed to the stimulating bitters, are a bitter taste, but they don't have a stimulating activity. Diterpenes and also glycosides, and one specific category is anthraquinone glycosides, which are laxatives. These are cooling and drying remedies, and these are the herbs that are primarily used for detoxification, for what we think of as cleansing. Now, cleansing is typically done with a little bit of aromatics and mostly bitters. You sometimes will add some herbs with some other qualities, but mostly you're using bitters. And because when you get bitter stuff in the body, it activates your detoxification system. So a little bit of bitterness in your food is actually important to keeping your eliminative organs working properly. So there's a little bit of natural bitterness in, a lot of dark green leafy vegetables and so forth. One of the reasons why kids don't like vegetables is because vegetables typically have a little bit of bitterness in them. But that little bit of bitterness is really important because it stimulates your liver to detoxify. It helps keep your bowels and your kidneys and your lymphatics and stuff working, as well as the fact that the little bit of bitterness stimulates both hydrochloric acid production and bile secretion. So in the Bible, when the children of Israel ate the fatty Passover lamb with bitter herbs, those bitter herbs actually are going to help digest the protein and fat in that lamb and make it easier to digest. And the origin of a salad prior to dinner actually has its origins in eating bitter greens at the beginning of a meal to stimulate digestion. and help with detoxification. There are a few calming bitters that have relaxing effects that can help to relieve pain, but detoxification in general sometimes helps to relieve pain because it removes the irritants from the body that are causing pain. The herbs that have anthraquinone glycosides are more specifically laxative, and bitters are said to tonify the heart in traditional Chinese medicine. Now, simple bitters, simple bitters include things like alfalfa, artichoke leaf, blessed thistle or milk thistle, the dandelion leaf and root, or gentian. These are basically remedies that aren't toxic, but they're just have a very strong bitter taste. Um, Dandelion leaves have been eaten as food. Animals eat alfalfa for food. Um, the relaxing bitters include hops, valerian, and to a lesser degree, wild lettuce. And then your laxative bitters that contain anthraquinone glycosides include buckthorn, cascara, senna, and Turkey rhubarb. By the way, cascara and buckthorn start off being quite acrid, um, so acrid that you can't take them because they really make you throw up and whatever. As you age the bark, you let it mature, cure for a year or so, it gets milder and becomes more suitable as a stimulant laxative. But again, these are very, very detoxifying herbs and used to clear up very stagnant conditions. Now, the earth element, which goes to the sunset, the fall equinox, it's the opposite. Um, um, Technically speaking, acrid and astringent are balanced between the warming and cooling, and they work primarily to either loosen or consolidate tissue. So on the model of the 6 tissue states that goes along with this, you have the tissue that's hot, tissue that's cold, tissue that's damp, and tissue that's dry. And the other 2 axes are tissue that is tight or tissue that is too loose. And so this particular up and down axis works on the idea of tissue being too tight or tissue being too loose. And the category here is astringent, which is opposite of acrid. Acrid loosens tight tissue, astringent tightens loose tissue. So this is very embodied, very stable, very strong, very solid, very rooted, very firm, very grounded. And it counteracts loose, leaking, bleeding, dripping, atonic, unstable, disconnected, ungrounded, and swollen tissue. So astringent herbs are slightly bitter. So in fact, when I've given astringent herbs for people to taste, they think, oh, it's bitter. So it's moving from bitter, but it adds a drying, slightly puckering sensation, which leads into the next category, that's sour, because sour has a definite puckering sensation, but the bitter is kind of left behind. So you're moving from the bitter to the astringent, which is slightly bitter, but is then toning and puckering, and then into sour, which is very puckering. The constituents here are tannins and also tannic and gallic acid. Pycnogenols are also closely related to tannins. These are very drying and very constricting remedies, and the opposite is of acrid. And so they arrest excessive discharge rather than getting discharge moving, like, lobelia can make you throw up. It can also loosen your bowel. It can make you sweat. This does the opposite. It inhibits your sweating. It inhibits your urination. It inhibits your intestinal peristalsis. It helps to stop bleeding, helps to tone up loose tissue such as wrinkles, varicose veins, hemorrhoids, spider veins, etc. This is the category that the light bulb came on for me when my first herb teacher introduced me to some basic categories of herbs, because I had read in Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss that white oak bark worked on bleeding gums and varicose veins and hemorrhoids. And I was like, I could not understand how one plant could work on so many different conditions, which to me were completely unrelated to each other. But then when I started to understand herbal energetics and herbal categories, and I understood that bleeding gums are loose, swollen, spongy gums, varicose veins are loose, swollen, spongy veins. Hemorrhoids are basically a varicose vein in the rectum that starts breaking and bleeding. And I started to understand that anytime you see loose, swollen tissue that's discharging too much, um, which includes, the intestinal peristalsis moving too quickly, okay, as in getting really watery diarrhea, or when you have a membrane that's overly permeable, like leaky gut, that astringents basically tighten things back down again, tone the tissue. They also neutralize venom when applied topically to bites and stings. And I've used that a lot because, you're out in nature and somebody gets stung, and I look around and find, well, where's the nearest astringent? And then apply the astringent, and then it typically helps very rapidly to counteract the insect venom from bites and stings. So I've got pictures of the oak bark and Uva ursi. This is actually Uva ursi and manzanita are the same genus, and this is actually probably uh, it could be an Uva ursi or a manzanita because they look very similar. But this one is at Bryce Canyon National Park that I took a picture. But they include things like bayberry, blackberry root and leaves. Cinnamon, in addition to being pungent, is also astringent. Herbs have mixtures of qualities, which, by the way, the mixture of qualities is what gives them some of their unique properties. So cinnamon is both pungent and astringent, and so it not only warms up and stimulates things, but it also tones and tightens things. Then you can see some of the other ones there. Witch hazel, which is used by women to tone up the pores on their skin, and yarrow. Yarrow is listed under aromatics because the flowers are aromatic, but the leaves are more astringent. And you can well, that's one other thing, is that different plant parts can have slightly different qualities too, which is important to understand. Now, cooling is opposite of warming. And so this is like the fourth cross quarter. This is the mixture of earth and water, which makes mud. When I think of mud, I think of a poultice. I think of something you smear on the body to cool down something that's irritated. I've put a poultice, of mud on a bite and sting. I've also used it when the skin is used a clay bath with water and mud when the skin is irritated and has toxins and everything, that are irritating the skin to cool and soothe the problem. The qualities are calming, soothing, cooling, quieting, and sedating. Because basically, if you look at this, think of the sunset, and now we're moving into going to bed. Everything's calming down. Everything's going quiet. Blah blah. And so this is counteracting what is overly stimulated, irritated, hot, inflamed, restless, agitated, or nervous. And the taste here is sour. Sour in Chinese medicine tonifies the liver qi, which, by the way, the liver meridian kicks in gear right around the time you go to bed. And this is due to fruit acids, which include vitamin C, flavonoids, and basically a lot of antioxidants, which are present in things like berries and citrus fruits and so forth, that are primarily cooling because they have an antioxidant effect. They halt free radical activity. And the opposite category of these is the bitter stimulants. So these are primarily used as antioxidants and anti-inflammatories to reduce free radical damage and soothe irritated, inflamed tissues. They also improve capillary integrity and have a little bit of a toning action like astringent. So in other words, there's a transition taking place here. So instead of loosening things up, we're now moving into toning things up to make things firmer and tighter, which is we're moving into a stronger yin energy, which is building and consolidating. So they tonify the liver qi, the wood element in Chinese medicine, and protect the liver from damage from detoxification. And these include all of your berries, hawthorn, which reduces the inflammation that causes cardiovascular disease, your lycium or goji berries or wolf berries, which are very high in vitamin C and are used to cool the liver, mangosteen, noni juice, raspberries. Schizandra has five of these different tastes, but the primary one in Schizandra is sour. And uh, all of these are cooling and soothing irritation. Um, Now we move to the water category. And water is the yin, and it represents the time of the winter solstice, the middle of the night, when everything's resting, everything's quiet, everything's peaceful. So it represents the quality of peace, relaxation, flexibility, rest, open, soothed, counteracting the opposite, which is fire, irritation, redness, stimulation, excitability, and so forth. And the two categories here are oily and mucilent. So basically, I probably should have put oily with sour, um, but I put it here. I think when I do my class, I'll move it because oily and sour fit in here. But oily are basically mostly seeds that contain oils that have essential fatty acids, which are very moistening to tissues. Oils are very moistening and lubricating to tissues. They're also cooling, they reduce irritation, and they're nourishing. And the opposite of oily is pungent. I remember I talking about the sour cream soothing the habanero pepper. Oils provide energy. They're used to make fuel, but they're used to not like a quick hot fuel like sugars, but a sustained energy uh, that you know that lasts over a longer period of time. They help the immune system. They help the nerves. Nervous tissue is very fatty. They also aid glandular function. Oils with GLA or omega-3 fatty acids actually help reduce inflammation and tissue irritation. A lot of these things will lubricate the stool for better elimination, but it's doing so not by stimulating elimination, but rather by uh, making things moister so that the things can move more easily. Also, they lubricate dry tissues and are helpful for dry skin and skin irritation and help keep tissues flexible. So I put like the idea that we use oil for massage. So oily herbs would include black currant seeds, borage seeds, coconut, like coconut oil, evening primrose seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, which are both good sources of omega-3 fatty acids, olives and olive oil, pumpkin seeds, and sunflower seeds. Um, I learned from Matthew Wood that sunflower seeds are a good remedy for a dry cough because of their oily nature. And so all of this is soothing. Now, mucilants are plants that contain water-soluble fibers, water-loving fibers, and so they feel slippery or slimy when moist, and the flavor of them is generally bland or very mildly sweet, but not like sugary, but just um, pleasant but slimy. And I use the example of pulling the pumpkin guts out because that feeling of if you've ever carved out a pumpkin and scraped out the middle, that slimy quality is exactly what we're talking about. That's mucilent, um, which is very moistening, very cooling, and very nourishing. And the opposite of that is aromatic. So mucilent herbs act as bulk laxatives. They hold moisture. So again, oily and okay, this gives you an idea of energetics, right? Because I can cure constipation. Okay, constipation may be because the colon is too dry. All right, If it's too dry, then the best remedies are your oily seeds like flaxseed and mucilaginous herbs like slippery elm or psyllium or so forth. Whereas if the colon is sluggish and stagnant, then maybe pungent herbs and bitter herbs are going to be better for the colon. So see, again, the remedy depends on the tissue state, not on the fact that you're constipated, but what is the state of the tissues that's causing the constipation. They also feed the friendly gut bacteria to promote intestinal health. They absorb toxins that are released by the liver into the bile, which also they reduce cholesterol, which is released in the bile. When applied topically as poultices, they help the tissues heal. And they do have an immune activity, especially on mucous membranes, because they actually put your macrophages on a higher state of alert, which makes your body more on the lookout for disease. And examples of these include aloe vera, which a lot of you will be very familiar with, and a lot of your seaweeds like Irish moss and kelp, psyllium, slippery elm. If you ever had okra, that's a vegetable that's very mucilaginous, and comfrey, particularly the root, is very mucilaginous. All examples of this kind of quality. So you like apply aloe vera to a burn, irritated red skin, and so forth. And now we move into the what will be the first cross quarter on the year, which is the late winter, late night, early morning, or the late winter, early spring. This is when the liver and lung meridian are the most active, according to TCM. It's also when you actually have the cold and flu season. The quality here is fluid, renewed, light, energized, rested, renewed, replenished, hydrated, flexible, and uplifted, because there's a quality of being kind of this is the time when you're most likely to be dreaming, okay, in the night, which counteracts the opposite of that, which is being rigid, stiff, dogmatic, brittle, dry. Because this is moist. The opposite of that is dry. Moist is fluid, more open, more moving, more flexible, versus more rigid and stuck. The two qualities that have this the most strongly are the sweet taste and the salty taste. Sweet herbs are not like sugary. The sweetness in plants is a little more like the sweetness of dark chocolate or the sweetness of licorice root, not the licorice candy, unless you buy the natural black licorice candy at the health food store. It has that kind of a taste. It's actually the sweetness of beets and carrots, is because beets and carrots are actually sweet herbs. They contain polysaccharides and saponins. They're moistening. They're neutral in temperature generally, neither warming nor cooling, but they can be either slightly on the warming side or slightly on the cooling side. But they also help to just build up a depleted system. And the opposite category of this is the most strong detoxifying herbs, which are fragrant bitters. These are the herbs that are generally used when persons become weak, when they're growing old, when they're thin, when they're pale, when they're emaciated, because it builds up the body. It helps that yin nourishing process in the body, helps modulate stress. A lot of these plants act as adaptogens, can often strengthen the immune system when it's really weak, which is important for people who are very susceptible to getting sick. And they're often used in various cultures to help people who are elderly regain their health. And examples of these, licorice root and ginseng are really two great examples of this. Codonopsis, bee pollen, astragalus. The Chinese use astragalus in the wintertime to ward off wintertime colds and flu, but it's mostly helpful when you've got cold, dry air in the winter, which is very damaging to the lungs. I put beets on here because beets actually are a sweet tonic, very nourishing. uh, I, they actually, Dong Quai is related to carrots and actually has a very carrot-like flavor and odor. And people have used carrots for healing too. We don't often think of some of our Western vegetables as medicines, but they really can be used as medicines and fit into this category. This is a good category of herbs for people who are weak and sick. Now, salty, whoops. I was just trying to move my thing and it went too far. Salty herbs, again, the taste of salty in plants is not like salt. It's more like a grassy quality or a green quality. Celery is a good example of a salty herb. So is spinach. Generally, these contain mineral electrolytes like magnesium, potassium, sodium, and calcium that are, they're called electrolytes because they help the body store energy like a battery and move electrons through the system, and they keep fluids moving from and keep them from becoming stagnant. Um, they can they help to balance out the moisture so that it's neither too damp or too dry, and they're also very nourishing because they supply minerals and nutrients and so forth. And the opposite category is simple bitters. These supply trace minerals to help heal tissues, broken bones, and other injuries, help support kidney function by supplying potassium and other electrolytes, help promote lymph flow and relieve lymphatic congestion in swollen lymph nodes to keep the fluids of the body moving properly. They help to loosen mucus, and they tend to improve alkalinity, which is the way the body stores energy in the form of alkalinity, because alkalinity has electrons to donate to chemical reactions. And examples of these herbs include alfalfa and your barley grass and wheatgrass, your dandelion leaf, mullein, nettles. Nettles is one of my favorite salty herbs. Mullein is another really wonderful salty herbs. Again, like mullein is really good when you have dry lung tissue, but it also helps with swollen lymph nodes, helps heal broken bones. So a lot of times we have a very narrow idea of our remedies because we get the idea, oh, this is used for this. But if you look at it energetically, you will a lot of times understand the broader applications of that herb that maybe aren't as popular in our current herbal marketplace. So this is the chart we've created, and I'm going to get to some questions and answers here very shortly because some people have typed in some questions. But I want to just talk a little bit about the, I want to talk about this whole wheel again and get you like understand, appreciate. If you, again, you look at the qualities opposite, acrid, astringent, you know, alkaloidal and sour, the stimulating bitters, and the pungent, the warming remedies here, the cooling remedies here, the invigorating remedies here, the calming remedy here, the very strongly detoxifying, you know, getting rid of stuff here, the consolidating, building up, nourishing remedies here. They go around the wheel. And when you start to understand this, it gives you a better understanding of how to use herbs, because the idea is you're trying to get the body's energies to move properly again. Illness is when the body sort of gets stuck. It's not the vibrating quality of the body is kind of stuck in a particular state. It may be stuck with like swollen lymph nodes, or it may be stuck with low energy, or it may be stuck with dry tissue. And so you apply the remedies to help bring the tissues back into balance so the body can do what it's designed to do and heal. And so there's examples here of different herbs. My favorite ones are in bold, and then the qualities and properties of the plants as it goes around the wheel. And you can see the four elements in the center. So the air is salty, acrid, and alkaloidal. The fire is pungent, aromatic, and fragrant bitter. The earth is simple, bitter, astringent, and sour. and the water is oily, mucilent, and sweet. And so as you study and ponder it, you start to see relationships between different kinds of remedies. You start to see like similar actions, opposing actions, and that really is like learning the ABCs of the alphabet. It gives you a basic foundational understanding of what herbs do and how they work, and from there you can expand it and learn the actual uh, details of how specific herbs work on more specific things. But the other thing that's helpful here is it gives you flexibility, because you happen to be out of a particular remedy that you usually use for a particular problem. You think, well, what category, what were the qualities of that remedy energetically? And where can I find a remedy that has similar energetic qualities that will work as an alternative to that? Because there are lots of remedies that fit in every category. There's more than one way to skin the cat, as we say. And so it gives you much more flexibility in picking herbal remedies. I remember one time when I was at a person's house and they had something going, and I just literally went to their kitchen spice cabinet and looked for stuff that had the right energetics to give them to help them out with they were starting to come down with a cold. So I found some warming, pungent aromatics, made them into a tea, had them drink it, do a sweat bath, and they started feeling better within a couple hours, right? So before I get into the question, I want to tell you what we're going to be doing with this. So we have the chart, which is $15. It lists 40 herbs on the back, as well as what I showed you on the front. And we also have a little book that lists 262 herbs. It's $5, and basically just gives a brief description of each herb with its, whether it's aromatic, bitter, blah, 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 and what its energetic properties are, along with some of its common historical uses, as a good little guide to being able to look up remedies and see what their energetics are. It's not meant to be a detailed guide to everything that herb does, but just to give you a basic idea of how it fits into the energetic model. I'm also going to be teaching a class in June, and I'm going to basically break it up into the air herbs, the fire herbs, the earth herbs, the water herbs, and I'm going to try to cover about 30 remedies in each class, roughly 10 of each of the 12 categories for 120 herbs, and basically talk about each category again, and the uses for it, and then give specific examples of the herbs and show you how that energetic model works. The whole thing, if you want to get the chart and the book and the class, is $99. Is basically $100, which is the class alone is $99. The chart is $15, it's $5, so you're saving $21 with the bundle. If you're a member of our monthly member program for which costs $19.95, you get the course for $80, and you can get any of this stuff at treelight.com or at stephenhorn.com. There's a link to it as well, and also you can call our toll-free number 800-416-2887 to order. A little bit late today, but back tomorrow. And this is a great opportunity to get into a more detailed understanding of everything I've explained. It's taken me a long time. I've been wanting to classify the herbs according to this wheel for a long time, and I finally feel that I've done a good job of getting them put together. And so that's why I'm offering all this material to introduce the tools we've created. Now with that, I'm going to spend a little bit of time that's left, because I don't have a lot of time left, answering some of the questions that people have typed in. Yucca is cooling and drying, so it reduces the inflammation of joints and reduces, it's primarily works as an anti-inflammatory, but it's also a detoxifier. So it over time is drying. We think of it as joint lubricant. It's not actually lubricating the joints, it's reducing the inflammation in the joints, which is allowing the joints to come back to being normal again. Someone asked about having trouble with their bowels moving. Uh, let's see, tired all day. One of the things that the I find I have a very tendency to a very sluggish system, and I find that pungent herbs have really helped me. When I eat more spicy foods, my bowel works better. I have to have fiber too, but if I don't eat more warming um, herbs, I tend to have a sluggish colon. I know other people have a sluggish colon because they tend to have everything be too dry. So you have to kind of look at your constitution, and you kind of have to figure out which remedies work the best for you and your constitution. That's the whole point of this. If you're trying one thing and it's not really helping, then look around and see, well, how might I be out of balance? And then try some remedies in a different point. Now, cinnamon and cloves can give you acid reflux because they're very heating. Okay, they're very warming. They're stimulating more digestive secretions. They're stimulating more churning of the stomach. If you're already having a lot of heat or warmth or irritation in your digestive tract, then that's going to overstimulate things and create sensation. The alternative for that is then you go to something like opposite end of things, and you use something like algin or slippery elm or something to basically cool things down and help that. So like, one of the things that helps acid reflux sometimes is algin or slippery elm. Kimbalis always said not to use black walnut when pregnant, as there's a possibility the mother and body are not having a good connection. Yeah, that's true. Have puffiness and redness under my right eye for a year now. The reason why I can't tell you what to do for it is because I'm not sure what's causing it. That's why you have to get into a little more thing. But what I would try as the simplest remedy is something that is cooling and a little bit drying. Um, and I would use it as a compress. That is something that would be like, um, well, a good one is actually little green tea is one of the things I've used for that kind of thing. Is you just get a tea bag and you get it uh, wet in hot water, and when it's cool enough that it's not going to burn your skin, you just lay it over your closed eyelid and see if it'll take down the swelling and cool the irritation. The chamomile is better for cooling the redness. Something like green tea is better for taking down the swelling. Okay, the recording is going to be posted tomorrow at stephenhorn.com. It's actually right now at the bottom of the front page, and the handouts are already there. Oh, and I forgot. Oh my gosh, I forgot to basically. The handouts are available um, for if you look on the control panel. You should also be able to download the handouts from the webinar itself, but the handouts are up at stephenhorn.com, and the recording will be up there too. And I'm going to send everybody an email with the link to that once it's up. No, cinnamon is not mucilaginous in its action. Even if herbs contain a little bit of mucilage, because all plants contain a lot of this stuff to varying degrees. I mean, even there's alkaloids and bitter stuff in carrots and everything. It's the mix, the overall energy of the plant. And cinnamon has no moistening quality to it, which is what mucilaginous herbs do. It does not absorb water. It's not hydroscopic. It doesn't get slippery or slimy when you mix it with water. Um, that's the qualities of mucilaginous herbs. Slippery elm can be used for loose stools because it absorbs things. So you have astringents, which basically arrests the excessive discharge of fluids. You have mucilaginous herbs that basically absorb the irritants. You have something like your berberine herbs, which would deal with microbes, or fragrant bitters, which would deal with parasites. So again, the type of remedy depends not on the fact that you have diarrhea, but it depends on what is actually the what you need to do to bring the tissues back into balance. And that's the main thing that um, I'm trying to teach herbal energetics for, is to get people the idea that, sometimes you have a problem and you try a particular remedy, it doesn't work. It's because you're using a remedy that has the wrong energetics. It may be have historically used for a particular health problem, but you may have a different imbalance in your body that's causing that problem. And so you need a different classification of remedy to correct that problem. Celery juice, and like you know juicing things like celery and spinach and chard is a very rejuvenating, nourishing thing to your system. That is definitely a way to get those salty, um, kind of bittersweet things into your body that help you that. Yeah, the chart, as I mentioned, I guess that was a little earlier. The chart is for sale. Uh, Replay will be available tomorrow. Uh, so the way organs come into this is that if you, first of all, herbs have an action, a basic direction of action. I call it the direction of action: cooling, moistening, soothing, blah, blah, blah. But they also have organ affinities. So where those constituents from that plant tend to go to be eliminated from the body, or how they travel through the body, determines their organ affinity. So you have, okay, so the bladder is irritated. So cranberry juice is a cooling remedy that also has affinity for the bladder. If the bladder is irritated, then pungent herbs and aromatic herbs are contraindicated. But oily or mucilaginous herbs. So like if you've got a really irritable bladder and you're needing to pee a lot, you don't want to stimulate that. You want to cool it down. So you use things like marshmallow or corn silk, which are more soothing to those passages, or cranberry, which is more soothing to those passages. And this is one of the things I've had with people, is because particularly with things like the lungs and the urinary system, I'll see people, and what they'll do is they'll make a formula for that system and they'll throw herbs into it of every different energetic, and this is their urinary system formula. Well, it's kind of a generic urinary system formula, but when you have people who have specifically like an irritable bladder, you don't want to put juniper berry in there. You don't want to put things that are more stimulating in there. You want to put things that are more soothing and cooling. And that's, one of the big things I've learned from energetics. Yeah, and of course, previously I put the essential oils on the energetic wheel, and have an oils chart, and now I've done it with herbs, and I've got some plans to do some more stuff, of course, in the future. Um, Someone says, didn't understand now why I do, which is, I'm glad. When light bulbs go on, in people, I'm very happy. They begin to crave Mexican and Asian food. Body's looking for ginger. Uh, uh, so, well, that's one of the things that happens if you are not just swallowing things in capsules. If you're actually, learning to taste and smell and work with herbs, so you understand their qualities, your body starts telling you what it needs, starts craving things because it needs certain things to help you out. Oh, the classes will last for probably about the same length as this one does, an hour and a half with a little bit of time for questions. So somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours. The the strategies for healing book is being reviewed right now. We're finishing it up. Hopefully it'll be done within another month or so. Yes, it will be posted later to listen to. Um, if you ferment an herb, yeah, that's going to slightly change its properties. I'm not sure exactly. Uh, I don't know where to purchase herbs in the Seattle area. Let's see, whatever. If something's swollen, someone's asked about a swollen throat, then what you need is something to help take down the swelling. Um, uh, I often use for that a little bit of sage tea, which I also use for laryngitis, because sage is a little bit astringent and a little aromatic, a little drying, and so you by basically kind of gargling with and sipping the sage tea, it helps take down the swelling. Um, I've also applied essential oils to the throat to basically stimulate circulation to the area to help drain it. Um, Sometimes you just have to play a little bit with that, but it works. Um, don't know much about or using herbs for dogs. Yes, it's recorded to view again. Red raspberry leaves being toning and drying would nourish a tear in the placenta. Basically, the red raspberry leaves having that toning quality means they firm up the uterus and firm up the tissue in the abdomen. I've actually used red raspberry leaves. I haven't used it for a tear in the placenta, so I don't know for sure if it worked, but I've used it for hernias, uh, helpful. So it would be a good possibility there to try. Yeah, there has to be balance in the body. This person says, my understanding is there has to be balance in the body. So if the body feels warm or feverish, what herbs to balance it out? Well, like I said, the one way to expel the fever is to basically induce perspiration with aromatics. Okay, so the body's heating up, and you're going to pull it through the cycle by using the slightly warming aromatics to get the sweat to break and actually start cooling down the body. Or the other way is to use the sour herbs, like I've used like the uh, lemon, lemon water, or the one an antioxidant drink with things like mangosteen and lycium in it, uh, mixed into a little bit of natural lemonade with a little maple syrup or something to cool the body down when it's a little bit feverish. Um, so those are some of the strategies that you can use when you have a problem like that. Um, I'm not going to get into specific remedy, but cysts, generally speaking, you use salty herbs to or bitter herbs to break up cysts, depending on whether you're trying to get more of a detoxifying effect or uh, a, um, a fluid moving effect. Okay, someone asked a question about loose ligaments and tendons but tight muscles. Um, I know a very specific remedy for that, which um, I which is Solomon's seal, which actually helps to balance out the tone in muscles and tendons. Uh, Again, a lot of this, the specific applications of all this stuff, of course, get into a lot more details, and that's where experience and further study comes in. The main thing that I'm doing in trying to teach this way is, again, to give a person an overall structure with which to think, so that if they're looking up remedies and they try something, it doesn't work, they don't think, herbs don't work, but they have to look and say, okay, that I tried something that was cooling and drying, and maybe it got worse. It didn't get better, it got worse. So maybe I need something moistening and cooling. Because I've done that. I've given somebody something and it didn't improve. It actually seemed to get worse. And so I thought, oh, I went the wrong direction, and I picked the opposite energetics and it got better. So it helps you kind of figure things out and correct them. It doesn't give you an instant answer for every problem. I I think one of the problems people have in putting together programs is they don't think in terms of energetics. They try to do everything at once. And I tend to get a clear idea of what I'm trying to do in the body. Like I'm not trying to build up the body and detoxify it at the same time. I'm not trying to cool it down and warm it up at the same time. I'm picking a specific direction of what I want to do. I'm thinking, okay, this person's very stagnant, they're overweight, they're swollen lymph nodes, they're oily, they're greasy. So I need bitters. I need things to help detoxify them. I need to put them on a cleanse. Whereas someone who's very thin and pale and emaciated, I'm not going to put them on bitters and a cleanse. I'm going to put them on, sweet and salty and nourishing mucilaginous herbs. Best thing to do with astringent herbs on spider veins is to actually apply them topically, either using a compress, which is where you put the tea or a tincture into some gauze or cotton and put it on, or you make a paste as a poultice and then put it on that way. Either way works. Question about the blocked ears. I have to think about that. I don't know where you could get the liquid blend first herbs anymore. What courses do I offer about constitution and how to find ways in which the body are balanced? My fundamentals of natural healing class gets into that basically, and I probably need to go ahead and do a therapeutics class next. And I probably need to make a therapeutics chart to go with the herbal chart, because I need to talk about conditions. But we do have your ABC plus D charts, and the ABC plus D charts basically go through the body systems and the different biological terrain imbalances in the body systems, and then list the remedies. And the remedies are based on these energetic categories too, that help those imbalances in the body system. So we have the ABC plus D course, and but I really like to update it with the new charts. But you can get our ABC plus D charts on the website along with these charts. Okay, the link to order everything. What is being a member? A member is, we have a program where people pay. You can pay it by 6 months or a year, or you can pay $19.95 a month. You can get 1 month, or you can subscribe perpetually, and we bill your credit card $19.95 a month until we tell you to stop. Members get access to an online member database, which contains over 200 previous webinars we've done on a variety of topics, as well as every month we do 2 more, which our members get to attend for free. The one that is next week for our member program is on the connection between organ systems, diseases, and emotions. And I'll be talking about how fear and worry and anxiety and grief and anger and irritability contributed to us being sick, but also how they can be symptoms of different organ imbalances in the body that need to be corrected. So we're going to be talking about that. The last week we did a member webinar on a holistic approach to pain management. So that's what our member program is about. You can there's a membership link at stephenhorn.com if you want to sign up, and or if you call and register for the class, you can get the member program, try it out for a month too. Okay, I'm running out of time, and I appreciate all of you who are asking a bunch of questions, but I've got to kind of wrap this up because my wife is going to be coming and picking me up in about 10 minutes. Appreciate all of the things. Okay, so someone asked a really good question I do want to answer. When you say an herb has affinity for an organ, like cranberry for the urinary system, garlic for lungs, but why do specific herbs have affinity for organs? Can you explain this in terms of energetics or in general? There is somewhat of an energetic connection in the fact that certain energetics have affinity for certain systems, which you can actually kind of see in looking at what they do. But the more specific thing about the energetics is it relates to kind of what you might think of as the personality of the plant. That's where you get into things called signatures, which are the way the plant looks, its color, where it grows, and that sort of thing, that give you clues to kind of its broader energetic picture. Um, from a more biological standpoint, the reason why, for example, garlic has affinity for the lungs is because once phytochemicals get into the body is going to eliminate them through various channels. And so if it eliminates it through the lungs, which is what the alkylamine sulfides in garlic are eliminated from the body through the lungs, it is going to have affinity for the lungs because it's going to travel to the lungs to be excreted. So that's why garlic has affinity for the lungs, is because of its excretion through the lungs. So if you rub garlic on the feet and you smell it on the breath, it's because it's absorbed through the skin and then went travel to the lungs to be eliminated. Berberine, for example, is eliminated through the urinary system. So berberine has a mild antimicrobial action through the urinary system, but it's not eliminated through the lungs, so it doesn't have as good of an antimicrobial action on the lungs. It has affinity for the intestinal tract because it's actually quite poorly absorbed, and so it mostly works on the bacteria in the gut, balancing them out. So that's a little bit about the organ affinity. Is it's kind of what energetically the herb constituents have affinity for, what tissues they have affinity for, and they tend to migrate to those tissues and affect those tissues more strongly than other tissues. And that's again a more advanced aspect of herbalism. That's why I produce the ABC plus D charts, which show the different classifications of herbs for the different imbalances in the body system, but it includes more of the organ affinity. So of course, this is not meant to be a 100% training on everything on herbs, but it's basically a good starting point. Detoxifying from vaccines are primarily done through bitters. The best way to use an herb, someone asked about varicose veins, is to get it as close to the tissue that is where it's needed as possible. So it doesn't make as much sense to take white oak bark, for example, and ingest it when you're dealing with varicose veins on your legs, because the white oak bark is going to have effects on your digestive system and go all through your system. So if you've got varicose veins, it's actually better to apply the white oak bark topically as a compress or something to the varicose veins directly, because you'll get a faster action and it'll be more effective. Same thing's true with hemorrhoid. Why ingest it by mouth if you can actually mix it into a salve or a paste and apply it topically directly to the hemorrhoid? It's much better if you can get the herb rather than just ingesting it, to put it as close as possible to the organ affinity. How do you term what? Oh, by the way, the primary way I know an herb's energetic is when I've actually worked with the herb and I've actually had the herb, I've chewed either the dried material or the plant and maybe made it into a decoction or a tea or whatever and tasted it and noticed the effect it has on the body. Where I haven't had that kind of direct experience with the plants, I rely on the literature as to the constituents or what, like Chinese medicine or traditional Western medicine says about the energetics of the plant. And so a lot of the herbs I have firsthand experience with. Some of them where I have had less firsthand experience, I've relied on the the energetics from traditional systems of medicine. Uh, okay, Solomon still made you worse. Well, that's the case where consultations come in, and you have to kind of figure out what's going on in a person's body and how to fix it. Like I said, it's very hard just to answer a specific question about a specific ailment, because when I'm working one-on-one with people, I'm assessing what's going on. I'm looking at their skin tone. I'm looking at their behavior, whether they're very animated or very passive, which by the way is a clue to whether they're more fiery or more watery. I'm looking at a lot of things to give me clues as to what to do to bring their body into balance. And so generally speaking, I don't like to make recommendations just based on symptoms, because it doesn't really give me enough of a picture to get an accurate idea of what's going on in the person's body to get the um, value. Yeah. So yeah. So for example, someone mentioned about witch hazel and hemorrhoids. Yeah. So you can use bayberry root bark for hemorrhoids. You can use witch hazel for hemorrhoids. You can use other astringents besides white oak bark on hemorrhoids. You just, again, mix it up in something and apply it topically, because it's not the herb, it's the action. That's the thing I'm trying to stress through this is understanding the action of the remedy. Because if you don't understand what you're trying to do, how do you know that you've accomplished it? When you're trying to deal with a hemorrhoid, you're trying to shrink it, you're trying to get it to constrict, tone up, and become firmer. And so you have to pick a remedy that does that, and then it's working because the hemorrhoid shrinks. And the same thing with anything else you do. You have to. That's why I'm calling the new book I'm doing to replace the Comprehensive Guide to Nature Sunshine Products, which is lists a whole bunch of different conditions and remedies that can be helpful for it. I'm calling it Healing Strategies, or Strategies for Healing. I haven't totally settled on the title yet, but it's the idea that you look at the whole picture of what's going on in the person, and you come up with a strategy of how you want to bring the body back into balance. And then you implement that strategy and see if the body starts moving towards balance. If it's moving towards balance, you're on the right track. If it's not moving towards balance, you're on the wrong track, and you have to rethink your strategy and then try something different. Um, so that's how you work with this. Okay, if you've got swollen red joints that move around the body, uh, then the thing that you're mostly having is a inflammatory process. So that means that you mostly want to focus on the more cooling remedies, the more sour antioxidants probably, and maybe like aloe vera juice or things like that that have a more cooling, soothing property to them. Now that's just basically, again, without knowing everything going on in your body, that's how I would think about it if I was, dealing with that problem too. So anyway, uh, thanks everybody. I gotta say goodbye because my time is up. But I appreciate all of you joining me. I appreciate you spending your evening with me. I hope that this has given you a better understanding of herbs. And I can tell you, if as you ponder this and you work with it and play with it, your understanding will grow, and it will sink in and become a more intuitive understanding of how you're applying herbs. Because I know, like, people who do aromatherapy think essential oils do everything, but essential oils are all kind of warming, invigorating remedies in general. I mean, there are some that are more on the cooling end, but they don't replace, your oily herbs or your mucilaginous herbs or your sweet tonic herbs. Okay, you everything is about finding balance. And when you understand kind of the idea of balance, and you kind of understand how herbal herbs or aromatherapy or diet or whatever shift balance in the body, you become a little more accurate in terms of being able to bring the body back to balance, which is what you need to do to bring the body back to health. Again, thanks everybody for joining me, and I hope that many of you will be able to watch the replay and ponder this, and hope to see a lot of you on the class in June. So Good night.